Good morning. Welcome to the Worlds of Wow Facebook Live, and we are here on another Friday. Super excited about today's episode. As you know, at Worlds of Wow, we focus on creating playful worlds for all. And during the month of June, we are focusing on all things about indoor play. And today, we're also going to be focusing on discussing inclusion. So joining me, we have Kevin Cravens. Kevin is the amazingly talented creative director at Worlds of Wow. And our guest today, I'm honored to introduce, is Jennie Sumrell. Jennie is the Director of Education, Programs, Partnerships, and Professional Development at Playful. So Jennie, welcome. Kevin, glad to have you again, have you here again. So Jennie, I thought it'd be a great place for us to start. If you would just share a little bit of your background, how you got introduced to the world of play, and just tell us about a little about your role at Playful, your background in education, and then we have a lot of questions to ask you today.
Sure. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Play is my passion. I will tell you that this is so exciting for me to be able to share with everyone all the great benefits that play brings children of all abilities. My background actually is as an educator. So I started my career as a teacher. I taught adults and children with moderate to severe disabilities. And I worked at a place called Siskin Children's Institute. I live here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And Siskin is a beautiful facility that is a early childhood center for children with and without disabilities. So half the children there do not have any type of special need, and then the other half have a wide variety of disabilities. So I started off as a teacher there, and I just really became pretty passionate about communication, and I ended up getting a graduate degree in assistive technology, really focused on communication and augmentative communication and a variety of assisted devices that help children communicate and access their environment, from computers to communication devices. So that was kind of my area of focus for a long time. But then I went on and started working kind of with all the classrooms and doing a lot of community training and outreach, and working with our local children's museum on some disability awareness types of training for teachers, as well as exhibits that really were all about kind of creating awareness and educating people about assistive technology and how people of all abilities still want to have fun and have friends, and just how they might do everything the same that we all do, but maybe just in a different way. And so that was a really fun thing that I worked on, as well as kind of this outreach person for Siskin. But I went and got my master's degree in early childhood special education with a primary focus on moderate to severe disabilities, and was hired by Playful in 2008. And so I've been with the company almost 12 years, and I just have the great pleasure of really going out and sharing a wide variety of knowledge from our scholar network that we have been very fortunate to work with. Just in my mind, the most talented researchers and practitioners surrounding play for many, many years. And so I've worked closely with Keith Richardson from Utah State University in the Center for Disabilities for many years. And we have, just learned so much over the years about play, as it, really focusing on inclusion and what that looks like, both, for outdoor environments and indoor environments. So, I get to share that great knowledge with a wide variety of communities, traveling around and speaking to conferences, or just with small groups to really help them champion inclusion. That's certainly my passion.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, we're
great.
Your background and your experience is it's pretty extensive, and we're honored to have you here today. One thing I want to interject real quick, Kevin. I know you have a lot of questions to jump into with Jennie, but
sure.
A couple things. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that. We're putting out amazing content every week, as well as if you have not followed us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook. Twitter, and Instagram. So with that being said, if you're just joining us now, we are talking in the month of June all things play, and we're focusing on indoor play, and today we're focusing on inclusion. So we have a really great program lined up for you today. Kevin, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say, we've been a part of the PlayCore family for a couple of years now, and Jennie, I've really appreciated how you've challenged us to kind of think beyond just making really cool stuff and making environments that just kind of produce that wow factor, to really kind of challenging us to understand how we get a little more intentional with our themed environments and our play areas. And so I think a lot of what we're going to talk about this morning revolves around that. And yeah, so excited to jump into it. So I have a document that you sent me, which I think kind of helps show and answer the first question I had for you. So I'm just going to pop it up. But yeah, the first question I had is just really kind of a broad question: is who are children with disabilities?
Yeah, when you look at this graphic, this was actually pulled from the Department of Education statistics. But when you kind of look here, we automatically think about, sometimes we think about physical disabilities because that's the most visible. When you look at 1,000 children between the ages of 3 and 21, and we use that because that is in the United States, that is the when children receive exceptional education services. So that's kind of why that 3 to 21 is there. But about 85 of them will have some sort of disability. And so, when we think about disability, often, we think about, it's something that someone can't do. And we like to try to really flip that model and think about that disability is truly defined as more or less the limits of opportunities that individuals can participate. And really, that's caused due by the limitations in the environment. It's not necessarily it's not the person's fault that they can't access that environment. It's really the environment's fault. And so we want to really focus on both physical and social inclusion, and breaking down, yes, those barriers for people to physically access that space. But just as important, we want to focus on breaking down the barriers for people to socially participate. So often what I find is when people are trying to create an inclusive environment, they are, want to focus on physical access, and that is very important and critical and often the most challenging and difficult to do. But it is also essential that we look at all these other kinds of categories. How can we address sensory needs and communication needs, and how can we address social and emotional needs of children? So when you really focus on more of a whole child development, rather than just that physical aspect, you can really make an environment that is truly designed for, yes, children of all abilities, but also including those with disabilities. So, sure. Really, honing in on how can we select elements in an environment that really address these key areas of cognition, communication, sensory, social, emotional, and physical.
Love that. I mean, I wrote that down, but yeah, just love, that call out that it's the environment's fault. And that's something, we could help out with. So yeah, I love that call out right there. So we talked to Tom and Stuart last week, and it was all about the science of play. But kind of just with some of the things you're saying, I mean, why is play so important for kids of all abilities?
Right. Well, I truly believe that it is a right of every child to have those meaningful, play experiences. It lays that fundamental, foundation for development. And if you think about your favorite moments in play as a child, I think back to those moments and all the gifts that were given to me, that still ring true today as an adult. And that created that foundation for me to develop things like confidence and independence and understanding and problem solving, creativity. So in my mind, every child deserves those same play gifts, if you will. And to no fault of their own, often children that have special needs, they might not have the same types of opportunities or prior experiences coming to an environment that others have. And so it is kind of our role to figure out how do we make sure that we are still giving them those great opportunities for meaningful play with their peers, their family members, their community members. And when you think about an inclusive environment, it should be active. It should be welcoming. You know, it should feel, the child should feel smart, and they should feel like they're having a really fair experience. So there's lots of things that we know play is important, you know, from our physical health to our mental health and emotional well-being. But I think it all just goes back to, we know that when children are at play, that they are at their highest level of learning. And my kind of mentor, I guess, somebody, you know, that has always inspired me is Fred Rogers. And if you've never seen his documentary, I encourage you to check it out. It is called "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" And it's just so wonderful to watch. Kind of his message was not only geared towards children, but also towards their caregivers and their parents. And he always said, play is the work of a child. And so we need to give every child opportunities, not just to be on the sidelines and watching play, but also they need to be in the middle of that play and active participants. So it's very different when you think about putting a child or an individual in an environment and calling it inclusion, or that they've been included just because they've been physically put there.
Sure.
I would like to challenge, you know, everybody watching to really think about what they're actually doing once they get into that space, and that we want it to be an active experience. So that they are actually, you know, able to communicate and able to manipulate items and again, socialize. So it's not just about physical access and getting them in there. The important piece is what happens once they get there. And again, breaking down those barriers for participation to occur. Because again, thinking back to your favorite experiences, I know for me, you know, they're very social. I was with my friends and my neighbors and my siblings. And so usually play, those meaningful experiences happen because of the others that we're having them with. So that was my goal as an educator, was to make sure that my students were having those real active, meaningful experiences, and that others knew how to engage with them. So all that had to be, you know, taught or modeled or explained. You know, often children don't really have the skills to understand how to modify a game or activity to include all their friends. So, you know, that's up to kind of adults sometimes to model that. So that was kind of, you know, my experience watching play happen between children of all abilities. It was pretty magical, because you knew that you reached the highest level of inclusion when you saw children, you know, that had friends that had disabilities, but, you know, they were actively seeking them out, and they were modifying games. They were, you know, actually, you know, that was, you know, in their innate nature was to figure that out, and that they really truly had a true friendship. And I think that was my goal. Most of my parents, when you ask them what was their primary goal for their child, you know, and these were often students that weren't eating well. Some of them weren't able to walk or communicate. I would say the number one thing parents would always communicate to me was, I just want my child to have friends. It's a very powerful thing that play can bring. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. I think you answered the question. And I think just kind of circling back, Todd and I have noticed a while ago, and just, you know, with clients we work with and the worlds we work with is, we started to notice that, that word inclusion is thrown around a lot, right? It's kind of one of those buzzwords. And you know, I think for us, like, we began to understand, man, that is a word that's begging for some substance, right? So I think I would just notice a lot of just slapping the word inclusion on descriptions of environments, but never any like kind of science or research or practical understanding of how it's inclusive, right? So so that's what's kind of set us on this journey, and I love that you had brought just, you know, there's a science behind it, there's research behind it, and there's people like you who have lived it, experienced it, and bring a lot to the table to help us understand that. I just going back to, I mean, obviously you've had a lot of those opportunities to be in those environments, whether as a caregiver or just be on the playground with kids of all abilities. So I'm kind of curious, I mean, you kind of briefly touched on it, but just, I guess maybe a story or a time where, and you witnessed a kiddo with a disability who was able to actively participate at a play area. I mean, what was that like for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting because we really spent a lot of time where I worked thinking about that outdoor experience.
Mm-hmm.
We thought about things like use of color and texture to organize the environment. We thought about active areas versus kind of your passive areas, and providing a wide variety of kind of developmental progression of skills through beginning and intermediate and advanced kind of level pieces of equipment so that children could really engage in very active play. But, again, a lot of my students, they all use some sort of mobility device. Often they had a lot of issues using their hands and their arms. And a lot of them, use communication devices to speak. They were not using their voices to speak. And so if you can think about, as children run out to the playground, everybody's kind of, running around. Often what I would see is, my students were kind of the ones kind of, left with caregivers, left with the teachers.
Sure.
So really quickly, we recognized the need to do some disability awareness training with our children, to really talk about how everybody can play tag and everybody can, have fun on the playground. And they might just do it a little bit different. And we modeled, like I said, a lot of that behavior, but pretty quickly kids, can see past differences and really start seeing those similarities pretty, quickly once you start having those conversations. But what research shows is that it's important to have them. And I would say, several years down the road, because I had some of my students for many, many years. The thing that sticks out most to me is one of my students who had severe disabilities. He had multiple seizures throughout the day. So often, he was extremely wiped out by the time the end of the day was happening. But he had these true meaningful friendships that had occurred. And, one day I was just talking to his dad on the playground. His dad came early every day to pick him up so we could talk about his day. And we were just having our typical conversation, and zoom, here goes. I'll use my son's name, James. I don't want to disclose his name, but here goes James, just zooming past us. And his dad kind of, turned around and said, "Wait, what was that? What is he doing?" I said, "Oh, he's playing tag." And what do you mean he's playing tag with his friends? And he was like, "He's playing tag." And I remember seeing that emotion in him, and his eyes kind of welling up because one, he never really thought his son would play tag, but it really came down to the fact that he watched his friends really, embrace him and that nurturing experience. And they had adapted that game. And what they were doing is one child was pushing him in the wheelchair. The other one was actually running, and he was looking behind and he was saying, "You can't get me, James. You can't get me." And he was talking to James. He wasn't talking to his buddy pushing James.
Yes.
So that is kind of the beauty when you see that happening, and nobody told those children to do that. That was, really powerful. And I think that's, again, the goal is when you see kids actively seeking each other out like that they've completely, accepted those differences and they've problem solved them. And they saw him as their friend. They weren't, just using his device as a game. They were playing with him. And so that's I think the goal for me, for parents, for children, is when kids can see those strengths and overcome those challenges and just, make it work.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you kind of mentioned earlier, there's nothing wrong with James. It's the environment. So whether that environment is a little bit of training, or that environment is just getting.
Yeah. And I think when we start thinking about disability
environments,
it kind of shifts things when you start thinking about, that disability is basically caused by the environment. We all come to environments with different skill sets, and maybe today you're feeling extra lively, and maybe, you know, others have, you know, had something happen in their life. So that's challenging. So everybody comes to those environments with different skill sets and prior experiences. So in a way, we all have to kind of, you know, work together to kind of make sure to have the best experience. But I do think that when we start thinking about it being the environment, you know, that caused the kind of inability, if you will, for it to be a usable and a friendly environment. You know, the goal is to make a user-friendly environment for the most people to the greatest extent possible. It doesn't mean that all children are going to be able to do everything on a playground or in a play space and indoors. You know, my students were not going to be able to do things like climb or use a monkey bar, for instance. But we were able to incorporate things that still gave them equitable experiences at ground level that were still, you know, health oriented and fitness oriented, but they just might look a little different, and that's okay, because there were other kids like that might have autism or Down syndrome that could benefit from those things. So that's a common mistake I've seen made, is that, you know, people think about inclusion as saying, oh, well, everybody can do everything. That's not going to be the case.
Well, I think, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think what we've noticed is not that there's some fear around the word inclusion, but I think that is the thought process sometimes, that inclusion means kind of boiling it down to something where everybody can do it. And I think sometimes the thought is, well, then it's kind of nothing, or it's boring, but that's not the case.
No, not at all. And again, if you only think about making something where everybody can do it, you are probably going to create an environment where not everybody wants to go. And if you talk to families, they say, we want this space. This is not supposed to be a space for people with disabilities. This is a space for everyone. We want our friends and our family and neighbors and community members to come here and have fun with us.
Place for community. Yep. Love that. And I think in the past, I've heard you kind of talk about it, but yeah, just with play, and we're talking about inclusive environments. I mean, for kiddos of all ability, I think you had mentioned it before, but I mean, there's risk involved in play. And so, you might have to look at it a little different, but yeah, the goal is really to allow for some of that risk. Did I hear you right, or did I just make that up?
No, absolutely. Kids need to engage in healthy risk taking, seek it out in other ways if they don't have those challenging experiences. And that's when you often see injuries occur, because that might be, you know, they get up on the slide, top of the slide, or climb in an area because, again, it's part of kind of what we seek at play. And so that's what research really showing, and the great work of one of our play scholars, Dr. Joe Frost, who studied how children play and progress through those progression of skills. And so, you know, and really the more that you can focus on providing beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels of skills, not only will kids stay more active, but they are going to play safer.
Perfect. Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, I think especially when we're talking about, for us in the indoor world, you know, what we're talking about is incredibly transformative. It's very beneficial. We're talking about creating spaces for kids of all abilities, and ideally, Jennie, as you referenced, not everybody's gonna be able to do everything, but it's an environment. And I love what you said, and I shared it a couple times. You know, there's friendships that are built in environments, and man, I wish I could have been there to see the boy that we're saying, his name is James. I mean, I guarantee that dad will never forget that moment, ever. And so how transformative these environments can be. So still much to learn, and super excited about what we're talking about here. Kevin, I know we have a lot more to share.
Yeah, you have a minute behind you.
36 minutes, so we got to move along here. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, that's great. Okay. And I think we talk a lot about the power of play, and that's a phrase I've heard a lot, but I think that's a story that demonstrates that there is all of that. So I kind of touched on it again too. I'm kind of curious. So I guess what's the value of, we kind of talk about kids of all abilities, but what's the value of kids with and without disabilities being able to play together?
Yeah, I think, especially with everything that's happening in our world today, we have such diverse societies. Again, we all come to environments with a variety of challenges and prior experiences, but I think now more than ever, we are, really being, challenged, and it's something that is so critical for communities to think about how to create a deeper sense of community and create awareness. Ultimately, what I think about these types of environments, they're great opportunities, yes, to build friendships and to have an inclusive environment, but more, in my mind, it's about really education and educating others about the power of play, the importance of inclusion. So really creating awareness, and you can do that in your church environment, regardless, wherever the play environment might be, by creating some signage. I've seen a lot of people really take the extra step to create some signage to show this play area has been developed with these things in mind. It's meant for everyone, because when the beauty of universal design, and when you think about usability and creating this space that's meant for everyone, a lot of times you approach it and you don't really know the design intent and the thoughtful process that's gone in. So I say go ahead and create some awareness and kind of create some signage, or maybe it's a flyer that is available for the membership to be able to really understand some of those design pieces that have focused on inclusion and development. So you can create awareness, but also when you bring kids of all abilities together, and not just kids, but really all ages as well, adults as well. You're demonstrating how you break down, again, those barriers for physical access, but breaking down the barriers for kids and people to socially participate together. That's, I think, the goal. And hopefully, if you do that well, you're going to foster friendships that, are meaningful. Like I said, that are not forced, that they develop these deep social connections. But, children will develop things like understanding and empathy. Again, that recognition of strengths and differences, but how to problem solve that. But again, the whole goal, I guess, is to create an embracing space for people to really understand one another. And I think, the power of that is really amazing, because when you again see this group of kids or people from all backgrounds, it could be genders or religion, it could be not just about disability, right? It could be just my son is super creative, he's not very athletic, so when you get all these kids coming together and playing, it kind of breaks down all of that, and that's why I love about the power of play.
There we go. Hey, so I think it's kind of a nice segue to sometimes we see these play areas and don't necessarily understand that there's intention behind them. So we've been working on an indoor inclusive environment and been working to design that with you. And so I'm excited to kind of get a little practical and show what that could look like for for an indoor environment. So let me move some things around here. So I'm going to have this up. So I'm going to attempt to have Photoshop and SketchUp going at the same time. See how this goes. So this is, I'm going to be able to zoom around this while we're talking. This is an indoor playground, which is something Worlds of WOW has done for years. And like you've talked about, I mean, really kind of our old tagline was, we create ridiculously cool, fun environments for kids and families. And so the fact that we can make something look cool is not in doubt. Like, that's what we've been about. That's what we're about now. Like, it should be assumed, like, if you go with Worlds of WOW, we're going to do something cool. But what's been great about being a part of the family, the Playcore family, and working with you is it's still cool, but there's a lot of intention.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
cool here, that looks cool here. Well, this is here for this reason, and so.
Kevin, you got a little digital on us, and so you said something, and then Jennie started. So Jennie, if you respond, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, Jenny.
I think we're just talking a little bit about the intentional design focus. And so just to set this up, again, we mentioned about the importance of really looking at whole child development and the developmental needs of the whole child. And that's why we like to really focus on how can we select these elements, again, that are very focused on these 5 key areas that you've done beautifully here on this chart, but looking at how can we enhance physical development or address, physical disabilities? Also looking at social and emotional. So there's going to be people that have fall into the category of those social emotional needs.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at cognition. So that's kind of that developmental disability or cognitive disability. So things like learning, understanding cause and effect. And then you look at sensory. There's all kinds of great ways that you can address sensory through visual and tactile and auditory and even motion and movement. And then communication. So again, thinking about my students, most of them did not use words to communicate. They used pictures. They used vocalizations. So how can we enhance this environment by, doing things like that? So, and then there's other areas of communication called receptive language, which is much more about understanding vocabulary and letters, things like that. So if you look at any environment, what you want to make sure you have is a robust and diverse assortment of these elements. So that when a child enters this environment, regardless of their ability, there's something for them to do, and that will also enhance their overall development. And those are then tied to what we call our 7 principles.
Okay.
And these are, universal design principles that are really focused and tailored to the needs of children.
Okay.
And so, we're looking at these principles, making sure that children feel and experience something in these environments, like they feel included, they feel comfortable, that they can be active and, again, demonstrate how smart they are. So there's lots of things that kind of tie this chart that you're seeing in together. Yep. It is trying to provide an evidence-based approach within that environment. That's our goal, is to really use that research to drive that thought process.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so I'm gonna think kind of on the left. Yeah, it's kind of these design essentials we want to try and make sure and incorporate it. So I'm just gonna kind of go down, and I think while you're talking, I can kind of zoom into the area that specifically addresses that. And then, I think just kind of have some good back and forth. So the first one is music.
Yeah, so music is probably my favorite. I'm kind of a music junkie. I'm having a hard time right now with everything, all my concerts being canceled. So, but music is probably, one of the most inclusive features you can provide. It is multi-generational, meaning that it's great for people of all abilities, but it's also age appropriate across whatever area of development you're in. So let's say, you are an adult with a severe disability. Music is still going to be age appropriate regardless of your age. So really, I love music because it addresses all 5 of those areas that when we look at that whole child development. It's very, social in nature. It's expressive, and it kind of, you can express yourself. So that kind of falls into your communication. But yeah, you can see here on the unit that you guys designed, there's all kinds of opportunities for music. So I see some bongos. I see some other music panels that, play all kinds of auditory sounds. So I love how you kind of created that little music area, because that can be loud, right? And so some kids that have sensitivities to all of the craziness of that play environment and all the fun sounds, it might become overwhelming, right? So they may need an area to kind of go that's more quiet and cozy to get away from that for a while and have some sensory relief. So I like how you've kind of grouped that together. But yeah, so music is an excellent inclusive element, and you can see this stuff is at ground level as well. So it's easy for anyone to approach it. If you are using a mobility device, to be able to approach that from the front and to be able to access it.
Exactly. So yeah, that was a little bit of the challenge, is kind of taking maybe some of these elements we had kind of incorporated throughout the play unit, and and kind of bring it to one area, which I will address one of the essentials a little later. But what I loved about that too is, instead of really, we've kind of created like a music studio, right? So beyond just kind of hitting some of the inclusive design essentials, I just love, in my head, just kiddos of all abilities have a little jam session, right?
Yes.
Right. I don't know what it's gonna sound like, but there could be some jamming going on.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me about dramatic play.
Well, again, going back to, a lot of my students that had more severe cognitive disabilities and developmental disabilities, often we forget to really engage in dramatic play, that imaginative play. We're so focused on getting them to do skills like walking and talking that we forget just to pretend and have fun. So dramatic play could be anything like a playhouse, a steering wheel, a telescope, anything that would elicit that pretend play and encourage really creativity and imagination. And I love dramatic play areas because you can see those creative minds at work. And when kids are engaged in dramatic play, they're actually kind of demonstrating a higher level of cognition.
Okay.
So it is, you can always see the kids that are really physical and active and they just want to run and go. But then there's always the kids that seek out those more pretend play experiences. And so that's really important for all kids.
Okay. Great. So we have a few steering wheels incorporated throughout the unit. I think even kind of putting this all together, I think that's another really, I guess, kind of encourage dramatic play by creating a music studio and putting a band together and having all kinds of fun, right? So what about graduated levels of physical challenge?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, just that healthy risk taking and how important it is to really support that progression of skill development through play components that really address beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels of play. And what we know from that is that, again, kids will be more likely to remain active. They kind of start with something they can do and do well. And so that's kind of that beginning element. And then they move on to something a little bit more challenging. And again, the goal is to keep them active and engaged so that they reap the benefits of that physical activity, but also to keep them safe. And so that they're, engaging in that healthy risk taking, but not doing it in a way that would become unsafe. So it's important, I guess, in an environment, especially one that they might be frequently going to, for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
You don't want it to become kind of stagnant and boring, right? You want to make sure that it's challenging and fun. And even by bringing in other loose parts or incorporating games, caregivers or, people can really enhance that play space even further by thinking about different ways of programming it.
Yes. And this is one where I think we have been doing that for years with these play areas and just themed environments. It's just understanding that, there is an intention behind it. So having these areas where, there's those opportunities to kind of take that healthy risk taking, like you were talking about. So kind of doing it without even knowing it. But okay. What about communication?
Well, I think you've done a great job here with this. There's kind of two areas we'd like to address in these play areas. And one, I talked about expressive language. You're able to express yourself through music, but also if you see right there, the telephone tube that you have, which is connected, one at ground level and then one that is at a higher, area. But if you think about, again, somebody, it could be an adult with a child, or it could be two children. This is very collaborative. It's very social. My students loved this, and it's just so simple and an easy add-on. But when you think about most of my students not speaking, but they could vocalize, and I was just I wanted them to use their voices to express themselves. And so when their friends would be somewhere talking or singing songs to them and they could hear that come through that other end of the tube, they would usually light up, and you'd see this great big smile and laughter and that vocalization. And so, again, I love things that are collaborative and create that social experience, but that is really promoting an expressive language, where there's other things that you could do to really promote receptive language. And that's going to be using things that promote literacy with words, numbers, even picture symbols. And so I know that you've also got some visual supports. And so we are partnered with a great organization, Mayor Johnson, who creates board maker symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Symbols are used in a wide variety of ways, but a lot of students that have communication disabilities, often will use these to communicate their needs. It might be a choice. So on here, you see this "Let's play together." It's going to have a variety of picture symbols where somebody could say, "Hey, what do you want to play today?" Or and they would point to the picture or stare at the picture. It could also be used just even for wayfinding, and again, putting those pictures in different areas. But I use these pictures a lot now that you can upload them obviously on an iPad and using software, and that's how a child would touch it and it actually speaks. That's called augmentative communication. So
tell me about Board Maker. I mean, it's like they're internationally recognized icons, right? So if you're using that, it's like wherever you go. I mean, if a kiddo has that iPad or that flip book and something like this is at the play area, I mean, it allows them to just communicate how they want to get involved and get playing.
Absolutely. And again, this goes back to disability awareness too. So let's say your church puts this here. This is a great, piece to be able to share with other children. Hey, yeah, some people, this is how they communicate. They use pictures to communicate. These are, they're specifically called a visual support. And you'll see lots of kids that, have autism, that struggle with communication early on will be using these types of pictures. And so it's a great thing to have in this environment, but then you might have it in your classroom environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
Using pictures and visual supports and other programs that you're offering.
Yes. Speaking of the telephone tube, that was, I think we had some other options, but that was my request, right? Going back to, just early childhood memories. That was always a favorite on the playground. So one of the perks of designing play areas, kind of put in stuff that I liked when I was a kid. So, okay. What about looping patterns?
So I don't know if you want to go towards kind of where your slide is, but children will intuitively kind of do a pattern, if you will, when they're engaged in play like this, where you go down the slide and you have this great fun experience and you kind of want to do it again and again and again. And so the thought is to make sure that you're using smart design strategies so that, again, you can keep kids engaged in that active play, that they can become more confident in their skill development. And so we typically look at, if you just sit back and watch kids play next time you go to a play environment, watch them. They'll go down that slide and they'll kind of go looping right back up again and again. So you want to make that very easy. So for instance, where that slide comes, where the child would come out of that slide bedway right there, go immediately over and they can immediately go back and do that again. If that area was on the other whole side of the play kind of unit there, it wouldn't be as easy. And especially for a child that might have some physical, needs, they might get very exhausted by the time they came down that slide and then had to go all the way back around. And so they're not engaged in that meaningful play as much as we'd want. So just look at, typically we look at our slide bedways and then how they're going to climb back up and get to that area.
Exactly. And one thing we kind of noticed too a while ago is, if you are in a mobility device and maybe, you can't or maybe not able, at least at that moment, to access some of the upper levels, is, to notice, typically if that was the situation, like the best you could hope for is just to kind of circle around the play unit. And so just understanding the idea of the looping pattern and the importance of that is, for us, we opened up the middle. So really kids can kind of almost, figure eight pattern through it if they want, but really allows them to get in there and go through there and really create that pattern on their own on the ground level.
Yeah, the accessible route is really, especially making it fun and playful. So they're in the center, not on the outside, but in the center of that play. The handholds that you see there too, as they climb, that can really help somebody that is using mobility device to kind of transfer out of that mobility device, if they're able to use their upper body to be able to climb up or with assistance. So.
Great. Then tell us about active versus passive play settings.
Okay, yeah. Again, this goes back to kind of how you organize the environment, and so that it's easy to understand.
Yeah.
And really thinking about, there should be very active areas where, for instance, that end of that slide, kids are going to be moving, they're going to be coming out of there and running. You're not going to put a play activity right there beside it, or in front of it, because say it was a dramatic play activity, you would create some user conflict. So with active and passive play settings, your goal is to enhance the overall play experience through kind of a well organized and easy to recognize areas that are going to avoid those user conflicts. So for instance, you might put, for an active area, it might be the swings on an outdoor environment, right? It might be kind of what I mentioned here, the slide bedway. But for a more passive environment, it might just be kind of a sand and water area. They're still actively engaged, but it's not going to be a high traffic area where people are running and going to run into each other.
Sure.
But you can also think about putting things together that make sense. So I'll give you an example, maybe a table and a seat with a storefront panel, a dramatic play area, because it makes sense together. As we engage in pretend play, and we're pretending we're doing a restaurant, that then we are serving somebody that's sitting at that table. So you can also think about how you strategically put things together that make sense.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I think that was kind of the intention, of kind of grouping the music stuff together. I mean, obviously turning that into a very active play area, and then some of the other areas we'll talk about later. Just those cozy spots, and or just some more passive kind of play events. Okay. Then what about, let's see, ADA compliant safety surface?
Yeah. So again, going back to that accessible route, and we know that Unitary surfacing, like you see here, not only is it bright and colorful, and you can kind of create some visual kind of organization using color, but that Unitary surfacing is really ideal for individuals using mobility devices to be able to access, not only to get to the environment, but also once they get in that environment, how they're maneuvering around.
For sure. And that's, I think from that safety compliance, and in 2 weeks, we're in our Facebook Live, we're going to go through all the safety and compliance things to be aware of. Still working on how to make that fun. But it'll be good. It's important. At the end of the day, I don't want to get shut down by the fire marshal, but for us, I mean, obviously the self-contained play, there's safety codes involved in there, and then the flooring, just kind of putting that where it needs to be. And then, I think like you said, using it as visual cues, using it to help organize the play unit, and just, having a little fun with it.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. And then we have jump-in points. Tell us about those.
Okay, yeah, jump-in point is something that, again, after many times observing children at play, and our researcher Keith Richardson at Utah State University, again, jump-in points are really important, especially when we're addressing social emotional abilities. And what we want to do with a jump-in point, it's usually a seat of some sort, and you want to put it next to something that's really fun and engaging. So you can see you've kind of put your seat there, right there by the music area, right? The idea with the jump-in point is to draw children into play. So you are putting it in the heart of the action, but we all know you might be shy. You might really not understand how something works, and you don't feel comfortable approaching your peers. So it's providing a place for someone to sit, observe, until they gain confidence, and hopefully by doing what we've done here, that they will be ready to jump in and engage once they gain that knowledge and that kind of confidence again. So jump-in points are usually seats. They need to be positioned with really highly engaging activities.
Okay. I love this one. Like, this was eye-opening for me. I have 2 boys. One of them, and you go to a playground, he's up there immediately and best friends in 30 seconds with everybody, right? But I have, another kiddo, it does take him a little bit, right? And he does want to observe. But I love the idea of the jump-in that opportunity to detach him from my hip and, kind of be a part of the fun without jumping until he's ready. So, this was a brilliant eye-opening for me, and yeah, just in a very practical way.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and then cozy spots.
So a cozy spot is kind of the opposite of a jump-in point. So the cozy spot's going to go somewhere that there is no action. You want to find the quietest space, whether that's it could be in that environment or it could be on the outside of the environment. But it really is a place for sensory relief. So again, there's a lot of children that come to this environment, and we've all seen them, right? They completely have it's past their nap time or whatever it is, but they start to have a meltdown. But especially for individuals with disabilities, sometimes there's going to be times they might want sensory seeking. They really want motion and movement, but the other times they need that sensory relief. And again, this is really for all children. I've seen children without disabilities need those cozy areas as well. But
adults too, yeah. So.
But it might just be an area that's quiet, that's kind of semi-enclosed, or it could be. I know you have kind of a crawl tube that's got a window, so they can kind of climb up, sit and observe from afar. But again, it's really to create a place for children to seek sensory relief until they're ready to engage again.
And that's been another great one for us, just by the nature of these units in particular. I mean, there are kind of these nooks and crannies, and sometimes in the past, I know they've been looked at as kind of like nuisances, or what do you do with them, or how do you cover them up? But a lot of times, those are great opportunities for those cozy spots. The kids are, not necessarily even called out, but kids are going to find them, and they're gonna get that sensory relief. So, I love that one as well. Seating.
Well, it's really important, I think, for caregivers and your family members to have areas for supervision. And so, as they sit and kind of watch their children at play, just having, the seating is really more or less for caregivers. I mean, I'm one of those caregivers that I somehow I end up playing, and I end up at the top of one of those things and going through the rows. But I think, again, when you talk to family members, they want to make sure they can see their kids and that you have good sight visibility. So it's just providing a comfortable space for people to sit and observe and watch your kids at play.
Great. And that's something, Todd and I, we had designed just a whole play area last week, really a whole room, and just help, really kind of designing through the idea that it's not just about plopping a play area into a room, but it's thinking about the kids, but it's thinking about mom and dad and any of the adults in the room, and making sure that it's as fun and as playful of an experience for them as it is for the kids. So that's a good one. What about cooperative play?
So as you're selecting elements, I always like to say, if you have a tight budget, or select the items that are really going to elicit that back and forth between two individuals. And to me, these elements should be positively reinforcing interaction, and really that when children are utilizing them, that they are dynamic, they're fun, and that they're working together to drive an action or solve a problem. So things like games. I see a tic-tac-toe panel there. So, all kinds of different ways that you can kind of manipulate items, but you're working together. Maybe it's a puzzle that a puzzle panel or something like that more than one child can really work together to cooperate to solve a fun game or, a problem. Sure.
Well, and, we had talked and have it in there, a whistle at the bottom of the slide. And so, just that idea of that cooperative play of somebody, making the whistle noise and sending the kids down and turning that into a game as well.
Yeah, that's kind of an auditory cue, but also a way for somebody that might not feel comfortable or can access that top level, that they have an equitable kind of fun experience that's happening down below, but that it's also very social, right? So kind of creating those games at ground level, as well as at the top. That's why I love the way that the telephone tubes kind of connect, both levels.
Yeah, that's been a big thing too, is like, these play units, again, by the nature of it, I mean, you can go up, right? And so it can create a lot of separation between that ground level and the top level. And so I think, definitely being intentional thinking through of how you can, kiddos can connect whatever level they're at, right? So I just love those like little opportunities of the whistle at the bottom and the slide at the top. accessible upper body events?
Yeah, so an accessible upper body event, here you can see these trapeze rings, and anybody that is seated using a mobility device or standing can use these. And so again, it's somebody might brachiate, which is the action of traversing across those bars, or they might just reach up and kind of pull themselves up and hold their body weight. But the idea is that we're providing kind of an equitable experience that really engages that kind of activity, and so that all children actually can benefit from the benefits of physical activity. Children that have physical and developmental disabilities actually engage in a lot more sedentary behaviors. When you ask them what their top 5 recreation, things might be, they really tend to be things that often center around more sedentary behaviors like reading, playing video games, and watching TV. So, it's really important that when we design environments, we're thinking about making sure that all kids have access to that healthy physical activity.
Okay, great. And then motion and movements. I know we got a few things incorporated throughout the play, but
it's my favorite. So with motion and movement, it's really interesting. Again, the elements that you can add that provide the sensation of swinging and rocking and spinning, and even some deep pressure to the body, really beneficial. And especially for children that need those sensory experiences or have some sensory integration challenges even. So when you look at things that swing, I think there's some, the bumper balls, is that what they're called? Yeah, the bumper balls there that swing and move, that kind of provides that vestibular motion that's really good for kids as they learn about balance, and really, again, helping with kind of understanding that sense of where their bodies are in space. So, providing some sensations of movement are really powerful. You also have some things that spin, and spinning is a great way to provide the sense of proprioception. And so that is something that really helps with motor planning. And again, like that sense of gravity and how much force is used to move something. Or so again, the sensations that you can provide through motion and movement, really critical and important. And you're going to see those kids that are those sensory seekers.
Okay.
They go there, and some of my students that I taught, they would spin themselves for 30 minutes because their bodies needed that. And then they were able to go back into the classroom and focus. So it's a really important, element to add.
And then one more, and then I think we got it wrapped up. It's cut off here in the graphic, just the way it's set up, but half activity panels. This is, I think, my favorite.
Yeah, so this is, again, a universal design approach when anybody can use this, right? But if you are an individual using a mobility device, you have the footplates there at the bottom. And so again, the idea is so that you can go up underneath that so that you can comfortably reach and approach it from the front. That panel, which you see some panels, often that are going to be all the way down to the ground. What happens is the footplates kind of stop that individual from being able to really get to that play panel. And so you can imagine they're kind of there, and especially they have some issues with their upper extremities. When they kind of extend their arms, they're unable to reach it.
Yep.
So the other thing that people say, well, they can approach it from the side that way. That is not ideal, and nobody plays this way, right?
Yeah, so, I'm trying to think if that's how I tried to work. Like that just doesn't. That's not happening. Yep.
So these panels are again, you're creating a more user-friendly experience for more people to the greatest possible net. It's a simple half panel. So
okay, love it. Great. So yeah, this is a play unit. We've been designing play units for almost 15 years. But it's really going back and really thinking through the intention behind the play unit. So a lot of information, a lot of good information, and a lot about the science and the intention behind the elements and the overall design. And Todd, I'm gonna let you wrap it up, but I'm excited about all of this would be an understatement.
Yeah, Jennie, wow. As I was taking copious notes, again, it's more than just creating a fun environment. There's so much science and research, as you have referenced, that goes into a design. And I'm just thinking, if you're part of our audience and you're thinking, wow, I would love to have an indoor play area, an indoor playground like this, the very incredibly talented Worlds of Wow team can help you. Or maybe you're seeing this play structure and you're saying, wow, that's what I want. We'd love to have something like that in our space. If that's you, feel free to reach out to us at hello@worldsofwow.com, and we can certainly help you and learn more about what you're wanting to have. And great thing about what we do is all of these play structures are custom designed to fit into your space. So we can create this or many others, and Kevin and his team can also theme them. There's a lot of options that we have. So again, Jennie, thank you so very much for joining us. It was such a delight and very, very educational. No doubt, I know that our WOW team will be watching this video again and again and again to learn just from the research and the science that you shared. So thank you so much, Jennie, for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. It's so exciting to see, the audiences that you really work with embrace inclusion. And I just want to thank you for the great work that you guys are doing to really, be leaders in this area, as well as, your customers and clients that you work with that are really invested in building that culture and that community for people of all ages and abilities in their spaces. So just everybody remember, play is so powerful and important. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of this journey. And let me know, again, if anybody ever has any questions specifically about their environment. We're also happy, to take a look at that and give you some specific talking points so that you can share that as you are fundraising or as you're, communicating to your congregations or memberships, really what the design intent of that play space is all about.
Yeah, it's great to have you as a resource in those conversations. I know that we have a number of clients that are beginning these conversations. So for sure, we're looking forward to engaging you in these designs. Kevin, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. Right? Play is powerful. My big takeaway is play is the right. And so we have a responsibility to make sure kids with all abilities have that ability to play and play with each other. So love it.
Yes. And Kevin, you alluded to next week. Really excited as well about the conversation we'll have next Friday at 10 o'clock a.m. Central Daylight Time. We'll be having Aaron Barnes with us. Aaron is the founder of Unwind, and it's really focusing on sensory development. She's created a sensory environment, and so I can't wait to learn more about her experiences, why she included specific features, the benefits of those features, as we're talking about once again inclusive environments next week. So again, Jennie, thank you. Kevin, great job again. Thank you for joining us again. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube, our Worlds of Wow YouTube, make sure you do that, as we're putting out great content every week. Again, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks again for joining us.
We'll see you next week. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.